Living a bipolar life is kind of fun because I get to wear many different hats and do a lot of different things. And two primary things that I focus on in my current roles, and one is programs teaching the business of wine. And listening to John, and actually having known of him, we've met several times. You just cannot underestimate how important it is to know what these regulations are. We had a really great program that's actually pertinent to perceptions, perspectives, and opinions, a research project of consumer preferences and so on. And we had just created a really great deal with the Sacramento Visitors and Conference Bureau. And they had an annual program called the Grape Escape. And so we were, after 9 years of running this wine competition with consumers and doing sensory research, at the Grape Escape, it was presented by a retail store chain, and there were wineries at their booths texting, "Come see me at booth number 31 at the Grape Escape." And all of a sudden, all these fines started getting handled out as providing something of value. And the year we were supposed to launch this big program with them, they had to shut down the entire program because of a loophole, because a tweet was considered a thing of value to the company presented by. If it had said sponsored by, just one little change of word, there would have been a problem. And there was another incident that I think it was in Santa Cruz. There was a winery that decided, as a VIP day for our wine club members, we'll have people come and pick grapes and so forth. They were fined $110,000 for failure to provide certain conditions of employment. And the winery went out of business because they were letting wine club members and VIPs pick grapes on a day in the vineyard, and it turned out that was not covered under labor laws and so forth. So anyways, really great stuff. Thanks, John. So what I'm presenting about today is about research I've been doing for 30 years or more into understanding at a very individual level how people form the opinions that they have about wine, about life, about each other, about all sorts of things. And the preface to forming an opinion is a perspective. Perspective is a place from which something is looked at or viewed, right? And what leads to our perspective is perception. So we're going to talk about these three elements and what that has to do with wine products and branding and labeling, with customer engagement, with customer retention. And so we're going to go through this. Perception, a lot of people think, perception is reality, right? And how many people have heard the proclamation of, this is an objective wine rating or description or something like that. Doesn't exist. There is absolutely no human capacity for objectivity. None. In no way, shape, or form in any area of life. Isn't that fun? And the reason is, and this is, I'd love for you to walk away with this thought. It's called perceptual individuality. Every one of us is where we are. We have our own sensory physiology and genetics. We've got a perspective that is unique and can never be duplicated by anyone at any time. We can form agreements We can do research and have science and have data, but human objectivity is impossible. And perception this is just something that really struck me from Jim Taylor in The Power of Prime. Perception's the lens through which we view reality and try to interpret and communicate about the reality that we're experiencing. Now, why is this important? Well, the more that we focus on our businesses and look at products and we're running through the legal hoops and red tape of starting and operating vineyards and whatever, we tend to lose sight of human beings that we're selling to. And we're trying to communicate with them, and many times we take wine courses and get certificates and learn the lingo and so forth. But one of the things that's very curious about human beings, as we become more expert, as we become more focally engaged in our products and in our own personal passions, we tend to lose more and more touch with the market that we're trying to reach. And we don't know why. And we know, all of you know, two experts tasting the same exact wine, and I've seen this specifically happen over and over again. Oh, did you try glass number 3? Oh, wow. Yeah, wow. That really sucks, doesn't it? No, wow. Are you kidding? This is like one of the best examples of this wine in history. No, or number 3 from the left. What we have to really get, we're in the business of creating perception. And in everything that we do with our product, with our marketing, with the positioning, with the artwork, with the descriptive language, we're working to create a connection with people that in many ways requires conversations to happen that aren't happening anymore. I'll get into that later. So understand that all of this color, even these physical things, are actually only energy that are being perceived through a human sensory system. Oh, but I saw that, I tasted it, I smelled it. All right, I want you to look at the picture on the left for a second. And was that color or black and white? Color. It wasn't. Oh. It's actually a black and white picture with a colored grid, and your brain's filling in that the picture is actually colors. Can you guys see that now that you look at it? So what happens with perception? Something will occur for us, a smell, a taste, a wine and food combination. We will perceive it, and then we live like, oh, I saw it, I smelled it, I tasted it. That's reality. People will look at the illusion on the right, and it's really hard to look at that and accept that the two black lines are identical in length because of perspective. So your opinion would be the line on the right is longer and the one on the left. And if you had just casually, that had been something that had occurred in your life, you would walk away with, I saw it, that's real, that's how it is. Okay? And in the science of perception, it's just really fascinating how a combination of our own unique individual physiology, genetically derived, what receptors, how we are equipped to hear, smell, and taste. It should be common knowledge, but it isn't, that some people have 500 taste buds and other people have 11,000. And things are very different in the mouth of a person that has 11,000 taste buds than it is in the mouth. And then what happens is we think we can then explain certain things. Who here is a diehard sweet wine drinker? That's all you want to drink. Sweet wine drinkers don't go to wine conferences for the most part. They're not invited. They aren't. I mean, we know they're immature, they're uneducated. They're my mother-in-law. Who'd want her She's a PhD in economics. She taught university level. She's a millionaire. And she loves sweet wine. And she won't order wine when she goes to a restaurant because we train people to be inhospitable to her and judge her that she's unsophisticated, unfit. She's not even a wine drinker. The wine industry needs to be embarrassed by how we go about what the hell we do and how little we know about the consumers in the market that we've got as producers, as brand owners. There's so much to work with, all the legal and everything else. Who has time for these stupid consumers who are uneducated and unfit to consume our products anyway? And the funny thing is, you don't know it yet, but I dare you to go to the Napa Valley and go into tasting rooms. And if you've got a wine, have somebody go into your own tasting room and say, I love Moscato. What do you have for me? You'll be embarrassed. Go to a fine restaurant and ask for something sweet. And you will be stigmatized. You will be disenfranchised. You don't count. Now, the funny thing is, the same dynamic occurs across the whole spectrum of consumers at some level. Oh, you like Robert Parker? Oh, Parker, he thinks scientific and the 100-point system sucks and you're stupid to use it. Nobody's safe from the scourge of the wine knowledgeable, okay? Be really careful with wine education because there are awesome programs, there's all this wonderful history and trivia and things to learn, but we're not teaching the right things. The people with the most taste buds and the highest perceptive acuity have been punished since childhood. They make up 40% of the total available market, and they aren't included in the wine community because, they like that stuff. So what happens is, in our lives, we catch glimpses of things, we want to learn, we want to aspire, and perception is what we experience, all right? And it's also the way that we organize and interpret and put into context all these things happening around us. Does that make sense? All right. Your perspective is how you see it. You guys don't see what I see. I don't see what you see. Look at the person next to you, right? They're looking at you. They can't see what you see. I had a master of wine person I was successfully mentoring, Olga Crawford, and she was a brilliant young Greek lady. And she and her sister had synesthesia. Anybody hear of synesthesia? Synesthesia is a neurological mix-up of sensory information. So one form of synesthesia is somebody taps you on this shoulder and you feel it on your elbow. Now, she had a form of synesthesia where she and her sister, every word that they see in a color. If it's black and white, if it's in a color, it will appear in a color that's associated with that word. She goes to college and she's about 20 years old. She and her sister went to different colleges. And Olga's arguing with her sister over what color the word Monday is. And so to solve the argument, she turned to her roommate and said, could you help us settle this argument? What color is Monday? It's like, what? 20 years old, and they didn't know that not everybody sees the world that way. So really get that when you're at an expert level, somebody's talking about, oh, this wine's really bitter and you're not getting it, or vice versa, or alcohol burn, and one person's going, oh, there's just too much alcohol in this, it's horrible. And what we tend to do is we don't talk about our differences. We don't even know they exist. So what we do is we argue and create chaos around it so nothing ever gets resolved. Cilantro is a really great example for this. Anybody here have OR6A2? You've got it? And what's cilantro like for you? Absolute. Oh, I know, but your palate's not mature. Obviously, you didn't have the proper introduction to it, because I learned to like it. You should too. So this conversation goes on over and over again of people totally ignorant of this. And what we're referring to, OR6A2, is a genetic cluster, and if you have it, the experience, your perception, your perspective, and your opinion of cilantro is, how can anybody stand this crap? It is absolutely disgusting. You will never learn to like it. It's not a matter of sophistication of your palate or anything else. As a matter of fact, Julia Child had it. Did you know that? She hated cilantro. She had a dish in a restaurant. She'd send it back if she couldn't eat it. All right? And yet, on Facebook, whenever cilantro comes up, I didn't like it, but I learned to like it. Well, it's just we don't understand how we form our opinions. What is over-oaked? What's not enough? What's too much alcohol? What's not enough? What's too sweet? Not sweet enough. It all resides in the perception of the individual. All right, now, the good news is there are actually ways to make new market segmentation models based on a combination of individuals who share similarities of perception so that you can have product standards that meet their expectations, and even further, you can communicate about those products in a language that they'll understand and that they'll respond to. And you can continue to communicate with them, engage them, and retain those customers for a longer period of time because they feel like they're being listened to. All right? And so right now it's just sort of this haphazard approach, but understanding these basic principles of perceptions gives us new tools in marketing. And how many consumers, how many of us, this kind of stuff makes me want to puke. We've curated our terroir-driven wines that pair perfectly with blah, 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 and the olala berries and hints of gooseberry, and what the hell are we talking about, right? And how can you translate your product, the look and feel of your brand, to make it memorable, to be really sticky, if you're scaring the shit out of people, right? And that's what wine does. We don't have the most recent numbers on this, but not long ago, the vast majority of people found wine the experience of selecting a wine more frightful than buying a car, and more frightening and off-putting than electronics. It's not a good place to be. And especially with new generations coming up where they don't understand the language and they don't care about it. I've got 2 millennial kids, and one of them, Sheldon from the Big Bang, and he couldn't give a rat's ass about all this wine stuff. He knows what he likes. He knows what he wants. He doesn't want to feel like he's got to go get a credential to understand it. He wants a product that'll work for him in his life. Now, my other son's Mr. Bling. And Mr. Bling, it just needs to be really, really expensive and makes him look cool when he holds it. That's all. And if you can do that, you've won. So the thing is, the biggest opportunity that we have as an industry is a better understanding of the market we serve. Okay? So who are the customers? Knowing your audience requires listening more than talking. Hospitality is a real essential point of transaction for wine. In restaurants, in retail environments, being hospitable. It's a fascinating concept in etymology. The word host comes from the word ghost, Latin, hostis, H-O-S-T-I-S. It's an unknown being. The word guest comes from the word ghost. In German, Geist, Beetlejuice, Betelgeuse, all right? And so hospitality is actually the coming to know of people. It's not lecturing to them. It's not judging them. It's not precluding them because they have certain opinions or preferences. It's actually getting to know them. So there's new ways to model your product, and it can be bottom up or top down. In 2007, I was engaged for consultation by 2 big wineries. Combined, they sold I think it was somewhere in the neighborhood of 500,000 cases of Moscato in 2007. I proposed to them, because they paid me to do this kind of crap, that Moscato was the next big thing. And they're like, Moscato? You got to be kidding. You know, the grapes are easy to grow, it's cheap, it's sweet. Why in the world Moscato? Well, because I looked carefully at dynamics and trends, and one thing that was happening is finally, after bashing white Zin consumers for decades, that it was a fad, that it was a flash in the pan, and so forth, finally, white Zin sales were trailing off. And it was due to migration to other alcoholic products, not wine, that was at cause of this. And we could see this in the data. So I said, Moscato's the thing. I worked with one of the wineries on the specific product development, lowering the alcohol, getting rid of any extraneous off odors, sulfites, and reduction, and so forth, and whatever, and told them also how to reposition it. And they raised their prices from an average of $3.99 ASP, average selling price, to $5.99, repositioned it, and in 7 years, these 2 producers went from 500,000 cases to 10.5 million cases, just between those 2. Now, it also happened that the hip-hop community had picked up on Moscato and lobster and whatever. That's accidental, but it was because they were now promoting it. And most people in the industry don't even know that Moscato wasn't even a blip on the radar, 20 years ago. So by knowing the market and being creative, and in the wine education process, who loves wine and food pairing? And it's a wonderful thing. All right, you may hate me. Wine and food pairing, and this is a quote from the Daily News in UK. Wine and food pairing is bullshit. We've made it all up. It was never practiced in France or Italy or Spain. It's sensory interactions that are random and also falsely attributed for the most part. Red wine goes with steak because of the fat and protein. It's all bullshit. It really is. And it's easy to do. Go home, cook a steak, nice and rare, beautiful cut of meat with plenty of marbling and fat. Take a strong red wine. Do not put a speck of any seasoning or salt on the steak. Try the red wine, try the fat, try the red wine. It gets more tannic, more bitter. It's a lie. It's a false attribution of what's going on there. And the protein doesn't ameliorate the tannins and whatever. There's chemically interactions in fining wine and in denaturing your proteins in your mouth that cause astringency. But umami properties in the meat actually render it, try your wine, try the meat, try the wine again, more bitter, more astringent. The only thing that makes it appear softer is the salt you put on it, y'all. Who loves salt? I mean, and who loves salt and kind of almost embarrassed at how much you love salt, okay? Number one sign you've got the most taste buds, but nobody told you that. You've got a hypersensitivity to bitterness, and you need that bitterness ameliorated. You know you need more salt mostly on the food that you have. But yet, we don't know that, so we look at people who grab the salt shaker. Oh, the chef did this perfectly. Well, that's his perspective. That's his point of view. That's not the reality for everybody, okay? And so what's available is there's new ways to be creative and to communicate positively in a voice and using a language that is market segment appropriate. And so even still, people who are making the big red wines, well, those aren't food wines because they don't go with food. However, the people that live in a certain spectrum actually find alcohol tastes sweet. They don't get that burn. And that bitterness and astringency, that's smooth and rich to them. They are not picking up on that. They literally see things more in black and white, and their ability to discriminate different levels of contrast is much lower. They tend to be linear thinkers, and they respond beautifully to the valuation system that they're locked into, which is the 100-point system called money. All right? And so there's a perfect system for, this is somebody, it's a Vizsla on a $100 bill. It's one of the oak companies in there. By understanding what the market is looking for, you can actually, as a producer, create a better menu with the offering, saying, hey, we've got things that'll cover every price, every flavor profile possible. And there are ways to execute your business in establishing your online presence. There's a way to create labels that may really suck for some people, but are absolutely perfect for the market for which they are intended. And there's no area better suited for developing targeted products, and the target being a market segment and a price point and a flavor profile, and then establishing, you know what, Moscato is great with steak. Did anybody ever have a Moscato with steak here? Try it, it's awesome. If you love Moscato. If Moscato sucks, it will suck with steak. It'll suck with seafood, it'll suck in the summer, it'll suck in the winter. But we so contextualize stuff that we think we're positively marketing a product, and we're actually giving people reasons not to consume our product. So instead of telling somebody, big-ass red wines, the bigger the better, all right? There's a big market for that. Have you ever tried a big cab with oysters? Try it. The people who typically gravitate towards the big, intense tannic reds actually don't get the interactions that Simone would get with it, which would be this horrible, what a crap. And so, again, we can learn from experience. We can engage with people at a new level in personalizing that connection so that you can build your business, that you can build something that is absolutely essential, and it's called trust. People do not trust the wine industry, and they do not trust wine experts. Okay, the vast majority. So we end up talking to ourselves and so forth. And this is what the arguments look like. All right, it's a matter of perspective. It's a 6 or a 9. All right. Well, when we perceive things, they represent good or bad. This is the opinions now become the knee-jerk reaction to the smell, the light in our face, the temperature outside, the greens that are in the salad, and so forth. All right, and there is no right or wrong. There's just different markets. And there's different places and ways to go about. So knowing what that is, and then how you describe and how you communicate value and so forth, and then finally what you're projecting, because this is actually what you want to happen, is you want to be able to convince enough people that your product's the right product. You want agreement for that. It won't be objective because there's people, and how many of us has sat in a wine tasting and somebody's going on with this descriptive blah, 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 and you go, what's wrong with me? I don't get any of that crap. Anybody? How many people have had some wine and food combination? It shouldn't be the right thing, but it's really absolutely delicious. I challenge every one of you for a week, pose as a white zin or a Moscato drinker when you go into a restaurant, and especially high-end restaurant. Go into a steakhouse. I was told once by a really well-intending $1 million sommelier guy in Costa Mesa, no, sir, and he touched my shoulder, which you're trained to do if you've got irate, unreasonable customers. You really shouldn't have the white Zinfandel with your steak. It'll be overpowered. And I said, well, why? He said, well, you need a heavier wine. And do this. Try this. Get a bottle of, or a glass of white Zinfandel or Moscato or a sweet, low-alcohol German Riesling, and get a Cabernet, a Petit Syrah, Bordeaux, any big-ass red you want. Gently pour the red wine in. Now, the heavy wine would sink, right? That's what the word heavy means. The Cabernet will float. It's lighter. It's a lower specific gravity. And this is one of the big problems that we're all in our education and our learning. We're taught that it's got to be a certain way because that's what the agreement. It's obvious that you have the heavy wine with the heavy steak. What's not obvious that heavy wine is a contronym, because heavy wine actually would be the sweet, low alcohol wine, not the intense red wine that we conjure up, the metaphor that we've got to connect us to it. So think differently. Spend some time talking with consumers. Spend way more time also talking with the gatekeepers and the people that stand between you, your product, and getting it into the mouth of the consumer. So if you're producing wine, you've got to sell it to the distributors. You've got to build that online presence. You've got to drive people through advertising to go to your tasting room and so forth and join your wine club. And there's ways that you can do it that you may be totally missing because we're trying so hard to get our certifications and learn the language and learn the wine and food pairing and so forth. Personalize that connection, all right? Know that the messaging from one point through the supply chain, from production to the distributor salesperson, to the buyer, to the sommelier and the people selling the wine, it's probably going to be a very different story and a different value proposition that needs to be personalized to those gatekeepers, okay? And a successful brand is one that has a positive perception inasmuch as a person picks up, is engaged, picks up the product or orders the product and tries it off the wine list, off the shelf, off the internet, in the tasting room, all right? Real success, sustained success, comes from brand loyalty, from customer retention, repeat business that you can have. And creating ambassadors, people are so impressed with the perception of the product that they had that they'll tell other people about it. All right? For a number of years, up until, again, very recently, the number one selling wine in the Mondavi tasting room was what? Anybody know? Number one, Moscato d'Oro. And Moscato d'Oro in a 375 ml bottle that sells for $60. Do the math on that. That's a cash cow. It is unbelievable how profitable you can have wine be if you don't self-impose limitations on the market because of the BS that we've been taught about who those consumers are. People do want luxury products that might like sweet wines or dry, delicate whites or whatever. And creating that perception is the essence of marketing. And success is when you get the loyalty and retention, you win. That's what it's all about. So that's what I do. And I've got a new book I'm working on that's actually looking at the genetics, physiology of perception, how we're different, neural pathways, conditioning, how we learn to like things that we used to hate and hate things that we used to like, how we evolve. And it's not our palate maturing. That's a metaphor to make us feel more important if we're palate mature. I'm just friggin' old. But the thing is that there's so much for us all to learn and discover and figure out how we can engage consumers, keep them, and especially the new generations that are coming into play. Questions?
I'm just wondering, where can we get a copy of your book?
Let's see, I've got a couple with me, and I'm going to have to run to the airport at 4, but I'm at booth 61, and so I've got a couple left. But it's Why You Like the Wines You Like, and it's available on Amazon, too, for anybody who would like.
Okay.
Yes?
This was so enjoyable. Thank you, Tim. I have a question about the snobbery of wine that you began with. I've heard or I've read a long time ago that historically, at least in the United States, that was acclaimed, or it was believed that because of the lack of resources, say the less less wealthy didn't have access to wine grapes, they had access to grains and apples, so they made beer and cider versus the more luxurious wine. Is that true? And is that just an American story? What's the global story?
Yeah, it's just bullshit. And I mean bullshit in a scientific connotation. Basically, the division used to be completely climate and geography related. And where it was possible to grow grapes, other things thrive, but grapes are a really great business. And historically, you had to be near river to actually commercialize it because barrels roll and whatever. And so that then got, but slopes are important for the wine and the terroir. Terroir just means territory. That is the most screwed up word. It used to be one of the worst things you could say about a wine. It was earthy. They're not talking about the soil in terroir. They were talking dirty, like dirty diapers. Wine that stank was a vin de terroir. And it was dirty. It wasn't the soil and the essence. So what happens is these little things just get conflated and misunderstood. If you get far enough north, you can't grow grapes, but grain is grown, so beer became the staple. Mm-hmm. And you can also, distillation, whether it was chewing coconut huts and spitting into a communal thing and making ratafia and whatever. That sounds good. That could be revived. But if you got far enough north, you had your entire harvest in a really small area, and you pretty much had to ferment it and distill it to make akavit or scotch or whatever. So and then the class thing is a whole different thing. Don't get me started there. But the snobbery is snobbery is closely associated with arrogance. But it's the feeling that your opinion, based on your perspective and your perception, is superior to others. And arrogance is the feeling that you're a superior human because of your knowledge or your worldliness or whatever. What's really fun is look up the word sophisticated. It actually, the etymology, it came from perverted and corrupt. So sophistry was useless information. If you were a sophist, you were filled with useless bullshit. So who feels more sophisticated? I do, yeah. I know. Words are fun. Some of us love that. Some hate it. Simone and I, we love it. We just had what did we talk for, an hour? She lives in this hypersensitive world. And 40% of Caucasians and an even higher proportion of Asians live in this world of sensory hypersensitivity. In psychology, for anybody who reads psychology stuff, in the mid-'60s, there was identification of called a highly sensitive person, an HSP. And up until 1996, it was considered to be a mental illness. And that's the people dumping salt on their food and wondering, why am I not like the others? And the itchy tags in your clothes and the smells and whatever. And it's 40% of Caucasian people. So did that answer your question? Yeah. Be careful about the information we're fed. Be cynical. And for a week, try all the wrong wine and food combinations. You will find as much magic that way as trying to find the right wine and food combinations. Seriously. You'll have an oyster and email me after you do. With a Cabernet, you go, God damn, this is great. But somebody at the table is going to go, oh, this is metallic and bitter and whatever. Different perceptions, different perspectives, different opinions. What else?
Have you seen
Tim.
the wine and food pairing book about pairing? It came out last year, pairing wine with fast food and cereal and
and cereal and so on. I mean, here's crazy. Everything you need to know about wine and food pairing. Salty and sour in the food will create a psychological, neurological adaptation that will suppress bitterness and tannin. So take a big ass red, whether you like it or not, sip it. Little salt and lemon on your hand, lick it, sip it again, smooth as silk. 95% That's a very, very high probability. Who's brushed their teeth and drunk orange juice? That's sensory adaptation. When you have something sweet in the food, it will make the wine seem to be more bitter, more astringent, more alcoholic burn if that's what you get. Who loves hot spicy? Who loves hot, 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 hot? Okay? All right? These are people with a special neurological condition that when they get the nociceptor interaction on their trigeminal nerve endings and they get the pain of that hot spicy, they have an orgasm. And it's correlated to sadomasochism, runner's high, and so on. This is actually a phenomenon. And so one person's dousing their eggs and everything. They're traveling with their own Tabasco or favorite hot sauce. And it's like, oh, their palate must be dead. Actually, they've got really high taste bud count. They're super hypersensitive to the point that that triggers a brain chemistry reaction producing the neurotransmitters, endorphins, and those kind of things that, oh, God, this hurts so good. All right? And instead of arguing with people and say, oh, I wouldn't try that wine and food combination, you might have an orgasm.
Bring it.
Yes.
Tim, quick question. What are your thoughts or perspectives on natural wines and organic wines?
There's a market for them. I don't like them. Well, sorry. There's many of natural wines especially, but there's this whole new world. There's the standards from which, the funny thing is natural wine today is more like the wine that I grew up. I started my wine stuff in 1966. And most of you have no clue what really bad wine is and how much bad wine was out there. And so color and cloudiness and Brettanomyces and whatever. I was at a brewery or a fermentation project in Willamette, Oregon, and they actually had a batch of Brettanomyces beer that they were making. And it just reeked of what is considered by most people a major flaw, but it sold like hotcakes. So again, it's positioning. If you are going down the organic path, then the market segmentation, the places those people shop, what their mindset is, what they're looking for, you really need to get in for all of that to be on the label and whatever. Does the market for which you're intending the product care about that? And there's markets for just about anything. Then you've got to do the due diligence. Is it a big enough market? Where do they shop? Where are they going to purchase my product? How do I communicate with them? What are other values that they have that we can leverage in our communication with that?
Do you think it's a sort of a phenomenon that's here and now, or do you think it'll sustain long term?
Well, I can say unequivocally, I have no frickin' clue. But I know, I was with Treasury Wine Estates back when it was the Beringer Wine Estates from 88 until 99. And when I married the singer in the rock Motown band I played in, and I married the singer, and she was not in the wine business. And so we were going up to meet Mom, and she was embarrassed to have me meet her mother, because her mom, Joanne, was a White Zin drinker. And I'm like, well, what the hell's the problem? White Zin, I get the shit for free. I get, all the White Zinfandel I'll ever need in my lifetime. So we went up to meet Mom, and I had a case of White Zin and a leg of lamb, and door opens up, and she looks at me, and she goes, son, come on, let me show you the kitchen. And she's a wonderful woman, but you would never, there's a new emergence of product shaming and of consumer shaming. And it's all woven throughout, through Twitter, through Facebook, through whatever. Oh, these people who like Naomi, who are worthless, and the wine is worthless. Well, you dumb twits. It's the number one selling goddamn Pinot Noir in the world at a selling price that is enviable for how they're doing and the value of this brand and product. And it's people we're talking about. It's human beings. And if you want to market products and have a success like that, you might want to think about that market and how to better, instead of shaming people and shaming product and shaming point systems or metaphors that we use to communicate about wine, why don't we recreate hospitality and get to know the consumers, get to know the people we're dealing with? Because we are teaching in hospitality. We are teaching people how to be inhospitable about wine. And we have no clue we're doing it because we're tucked into our own little perspective and our own little perceptions. What else? Anything else?
More questions? Tim's got all day.
If you want to fly back to Prescott, Arizona. As a matter of fact, we love my mother-in-law so much, we moved to Prescott to be with her. And we're doing bluegrass every weekend together, and I'm learning all sorts of new guitar chops. And 85 years old, my white Zin Moscato-loving stepmom is playing banjo, and right now, this minute, she and my wife are learning how to yodel.
Awesome.
I know it, but she's a white Zin drinker, so you know. All right, thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.